Welcome to the Beacon Way podcast, hosted by award-winning executive team of Beacon Media and Marketing. With over 3 decades of experience, Adrienne, Jennifer, and Ken give you an insider's view of what's working, what's not, and what's on the horizon for digital marketing. Grow your business today with the Beacon Way podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Beacon Way podcast. I'm really excited today to get to introduce to you guys James Berry. He is the founder and CEO of Pluck Superfood Seasonings. So James was a professional chef in Hollywood, right?
That's right.
In Hollywood for almost 20 years, and recently founded Pluck Superfood Seasonings. And so we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to let James describe a little bit about Pluck and kind of why he started it and kind of what was the impetus there. So yeah, James, tell us a little bit about Pluck and kind of what inspired you to start the whole business.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on, Adrienne. I would say that the journey really began with picky eating. I grew up in a household where you knew dinner was ready because the smoke detector went off. It was very non-foodie, very, very, simple. Even though I grew up in the 70s, it was like 50 style food, very like frozen vegetables, baked potato, and a hunk of meat, on the plate. Usually like shake and bake for all those older people that might remember that. And then it became this journey of finding a passion for food and just really diving into wanting to learn as much as I could, but never seeing it as a career, never thinking, oh, this is what I want to do forever. Because back in the day, there were only 2 people on TV. It was like Julia Childs and the Frugal Gourmet, and they were both on public, like PBS, public broadcasting station. And it just didn't, it was like, if you were going to go down this path, you would have to have a restaurant and work really late nights. And I just, for whatever reason, I just didn't see that as a viable career. So I let it go until 9/11. And 9/11 was, kind of our generation's Pearl Harbor. And it just really made me rethink my whole life. It made me just think about how you could, anything could change at any moment, and that it was really important to follow the path with heart. And I was at the time substitute teaching, and I was in the entertainment business, and I loved creativity. I loved the entertainment business. But I found that I was working really hard and getting such a little back. And I was like, I noticed that I'm wanting to, that for me, acting or the entertainment business was just a stepping stone. I never saw it as the end of the road. Like I always wanted to write or create things, do stuff with food or help people in some way. Like I was very, very always thinking about people and community and how can I support people. And for some reason, health started coming in. And so then it became, well, how can I help people with their health? And so I decided to dive into my passion for food. I went to culinary school, and then that steamrolled into getting to work with some A-list celebrities and getting these amazing experiences in Hollywood, as you mentioned, to then running a meal delivery service. Because even when I was cooking for that 1%, I was cooking for Tom Cruise, of all people. And I was like,
wow.
I sat there and I said, this isn't what I'm here to do. Like, I'm not here to just help one person. I want to help more people. And so I left working for him and I started a meal delivery service thinking that I could bring my style of cooking to more people. And boy, was that a wake up call, because that was the example, if anyone is familiar with it, where there's that book that talks about you can be a really great baker, but that doesn't mean you know how to run a bake shop.
Right.
Two totally different things. And that was me. Like I was a great chef. I am a great chef, but running a business was not something I had ever done before. And boy, did I learn. Like in the 8 years I owned that meal delivery service, my health suffered. I worked so hard. I worked 4 jobs because I was self-funding that business. And
Wow.
I eventually grew it. And it took me a long time to finally get paid. And I eventually was so overwhelmed by that business that I had to just get out. And I sold it to some people that I knew weren't the right people, but I just needed to get out, and didn't make that much money. But I just knew, like, I had so many other ideas, and it was keeping me from those. My health was suffering, and I didn't know what else to do. It was like one of those things where you're so swallowed. Like I was so swallowed by the business that I couldn't see the forest for through the trees, that kind of thing. Like I couldn't see beyond just working in the business. And so we moved out of LA. We completely left that area. And then I had about 4 years I was a stay-at-home dad, hardest job I've ever done, but stay-at-home dad.
Yeah.
And got my health back, got my creativity back. And that's when I came up with the idea of Pluck. And for those that don't know, Pluck is a way, and it was really becoming a father. Like we had our second child during that time. And it was my way of, how do I get the most nutrient dense foods into my kids and myself? Because I want to make sure I'm living long enough to support, be a part of their life. So how do I get the most nutrient dense foods? Which, if you do the research, it's organ meats. Organ meats are hands down the most nutrient dense food. Yet there's 3 big hurdles. One is people think they're gross. 2 is they don't know how to cook them or don't want to cook them. And then the third is they don't know how to source them or where to source them from. And so I set out to solve those 3 hurdles. And I came up with Pluck, which is a freeze-dried powdered organ seasoning. So it's got freeze-dried powdered organs, 5 of them: liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas. And it's combined with organic spices and herbs and salt. So every time you salt your food, you're getting the microdosing of those organ meats. And because we season our food every time we eat, you're getting them frequently, which is cumulative effect. And we've now been around for 4 years, and we are absolutely seeing parents just elated that they can get this nutrition into their kids so easily. We're hearing stories like people that were trying to get pregnant, got pregnant, people that were trying to have a successful pregnancy, had a successful pregnancy from getting these organ meats into their diet, skin issues going away. And we've just heard amazing, really just beautiful stories from our customers. And it all started with an idea of, a father wanting to nourish his children. And it all started with me just blending these in my kitchen and trying them at dinner parties.
Well, that's a fantastic story, James. I love how the impetus was that parental piece. I think that's very beautiful, because so often as business owners, it is something that close to home that starts it, right? It's got to have that level of impact for us to go through what we go through as entrepreneurs to make it happen. So, well, and I could say, like, our family uses Pluck, and we very much enjoy it. And it's we've tried 4 or 5 different flavors now. So we definitely really enjoy, because I can sympathize with all 3 of those hurdles. And our family eats primarily carnivore, and still, I don't like cooking organ meats. I'm one of those. That was my number one. I'm just like, I don't like the taste. I grew up in Alaska eating moose and moose heart and choking it down every time. My grandmother loved to cook moose heart, and so never could quite get it. So Pluck's so much easier. So thank you for that, because it's definitely powerful.
I like to say that Pluck is for people that don't like the taste of organs but want to benefit from them.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, for sure. So, yeah. So, what were some of the challenges that you faced in the beginning? I'd love it, even if you could expound a little bit on some of the challenges you were encountering now starting another business. Again, you were saying, we're a good cook, but not a good business person. And I know a lot of our listeners, that's often the case where they find themselves. We've got a lot of practitioners that listen, and they're therapists or they're practitioners, and they decide they want to go out and discover that same conflict that you were describing. So how did you kind of overcome that, or what were some of the things that really helped you move through that?
Yeah, I really see the meal delivery service business as my education. Um,
Mm.
I learned from that first of all. So here's the things I took away from it. One is with Pluck, I did not self-finance because the self-finance slowed down the pace of the business because I had to work multiple
Interesting.
jobs
Okay.
to pay myself and to pay my employees. Whereas just getting funding, I was able to pay myself and appropriately pay for things in the business to get it going. So it enabled me to be 100% in Pluck, whereas I was not 100% in my meal delivery
Nice.
service. So that's really key right there. And then a big, big takeaway, because you probably all notice I mentioned a lot about how my health suffered. So
Yeah.
something, many of you might remember that back in the day, in the 90s, particularly in the early 2000s, there was a big focus on multitasking. It was like that was
Oh,
the
yeah.
way that you were being exposed and told how to run a business. And then we all learned that doesn't work. Multitasking, what it does is it takes, instead of you being really great at one thing, you're average at a bunch of things, basically, when you multitask.
Right.
And so what came out of that period was, and Jeff Bezos of Amazon really helped to make this, establish this concept, was that your health as an entrepreneur is integral to the health of the business. So you cannot separate your personal health from the business health. And so I built my health plan into my business plan. So I built Pluck
Oh.
in a way that I could ensure that I was, working out daily, that I was eating from home, because you can't be healthy if you're eating out. You just can't. So eating home
Yeah.
cooked meals, you can take your home cooked meals and eat them in your office. But if you're eating out, I guarantee you will not be as healthy as if you were in control of the ingredients. And then I also built being a father, because the reality is like, when you have a business, that is your child. And if you do have kids as well, then one of the two are going to suffer. Either your relationship to your kids is going to suffer, or your relationship to the business is going to suffer. I would rather have the list of to-dos on my business. I would rather have that list not get done than shortchange my kids. And because for every yes, you're saying no, right? So if you're just saying yes to your business, then that means
Right.
you're saying no to your kids or to your family time. And so I have very clear boundaries now. When it hits that 5 o'clock, I am off work. And that never was the case when I had that
Wow.
meal delivery service. I worked all the time. Even when I was
Sure.
on vacation, I was working. So it wasn't even a vacation. So I
Right.
have, just to bottom line this, I had boundaries. I included my health, and I got funding. Those three have been a
Yeah.
huge difference, and have really helped
Wow.
Pluck accelerate its success. Whereas I mentioned I only started making money at the meal delivery service 8 years in. We're already doing very well. We're entering our 5th year now, but we were already showing profit by our 3rd year.
Wow. That's impressive. Yeah. Well, thank you for those tips. Those are great ones, and they're very, very concise. I love the concept of working family and your health right into your business plan. I think that's brilliant. And I think a lot of us entrepreneurs, we're really good at saying yes and really bad at saying no.
Yes.
So we
The
don't
FOMO, right?
prioritize well. We just, yeah.
Fear of missing out, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I was reading a book the other day, and it had a fascinating chapter. It was how to tell your boss no. And it was all about that and prioritizing. And as an employee, how to set boundaries and talk about, well, I'm happy to do that. I can totally do that. What would you like me to put on the back burner to get that project done for you? And I was like, that's pretty brilliant. I need to start asking my employees that when I ask them to do something. Okay, if you say yes to this new project that I'm giving you, what does that mean you got to say no to?
Yeah.
Instead of just assuming they can add it to their plate on top of everything else.
Well, and a
But
lot of time it's the entrepreneur
it's
that's doing
something.
that, right? A lot of time it's the entrepreneur
Yes.
that is
Yes.
wearing, they start out wearing, 3 hats. And then even as they start to bring in contractors or even employees, they struggle with offloading, or even like letting someone else do the work because they have this, we start to tell ourselves stories as though, well, no one can do it the way I would do it. Right. And so then we just say, okay,
Right.
I'll take care of it, and it really is, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like so much of being a CEO of your business is about learning to delegate, learning to
Mm-hmm.
lead a team. And I even see it more almost like
Yeah.
coaching in a way instead of leading. Like, even though I know as a CEO, you have the final say, but I feel like I'm more, I'm always trying to figure out ways to help the team have ownership around the things that they're doing and not just to, like, be a dictator to what they're supposed to be doing, but more letting them find the answer. I find that helps. And then I also find the fact that the business is so mission driven in terms of trying to help people eat whole animal, and that we are so focused on trying to support health, that we attract people. The people that work with the business, it's almost like they came to me because they were so attracted by the mission and they agreed with it.
Right. Yeah. That's powerful. I think that's almost every entrepreneur's dream, is to have people coming to us looking for jobs, and especially attracting the right type of people. So congratulations on the marketing and your mission vision and how you're getting that out. So to be attracting people like that is really exciting. And as part of getting that mission out there, you've started your own podcast. Is that right? You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I did. It was interesting. The first year we launched, so you asked what were some of the big hurdles, and one of the big hurdles was that we launched during COVID. So that was fascinating, right? Because here we were, it's COVID, and we have a
Right.
brand new food product that no one knows what it tastes like, and I cannot get it into stores. I can't get to conferences. Like, I
Right.
can't actually get people to try it because everything's closed down. So that was an interesting hurdle. And
Yeah.
how I combated that, or I dealt with that, was I got into some podcast networks. And because I had the background as a chef, I could come in as an expert. So I had more value than just being a founder of a business. Like, I could, on someone's podcast, I could support them in mastering their home kitchen. I could give them kitchen cooking tips. I could give them all this knowledge that I had, acquired in my 20 years as a professional chef. And so I got on these podcasts as a guest. But what I would do is I would send Pluck to the podcast host before I was on the podcast.
Smart.
And what I would do is then when we were on the podcast, inevitably Pluck would come up and I would say to them, well, you tried it. How did you like it? And then I got the host talking to their audience about how they liked it. And that proved to be extremely powerful because, of course, the audience might enjoy hearing me talk about it, but that's not going to be as authentic as if they hear the host that they've come to, trust and listen to on a weekly or monthly basis. And so that's kind of how we organically grew early on. But in that first year, one of the gracious podcast hosts that had me on off the air, he said, "You should start a podcast." And I was like, "Oh, like another to do? Like, I don't have freaking time to do that."
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh my gosh." But he told me that first year, he was like, "It's really good because you don't even have to talk about your product, but people start to trust you and they want to buy from you. So they become loyal customers."
Yeah.
And he said, also, you're basically, it's a way to meet other influencers and other people in the field. They want to guest on your podcast, and then sometimes they'll invite you on their podcast if they have them. So there's a lot of an exchange going on. But most of all, you get these sometimes very big influencers who are guesting on the podcast, and then they try Pluck and they're curious about it because you guys have conversations, and then they become affiliates. So he basically said how having the podcast was an incredibly powerful marketing tool, inadvertent marketing tool. And I heard that and I believed him.
Yeah.
But I did not know how to add that onto my plate. I was like, I just don't know how to do it. So I kind of kept it in the back of my mind. And then just last year, I met someone who could kind of produce the whole thing for me and do it at a rate that I could afford. And I said, okay, let's do it. I liked him a lot. And so he and his team produced the show, but it's called Everyday Ancestral. And it is absolutely what that person 4 years ago told me. It's absolutely doing exactly that. But here's something that happened.
Awesome.
Here's something that happened that I did not know was going to happen. And I want to share this with everyone listening, because if you are an entrepreneur or wanting to be an entrepreneur, I think this was a big learning piece for me. And I hope that you're able to take something from it, which is when we are starting down these paths, it's very risky, obviously, being an entrepreneur. It's very vulnerable, because if it's a product that, is coming from your heart, is something that you created, and it's not just something you're acquiring, but something you created, it's very vulnerable sharing that with people, because it's almost like you're asking them to accept you. Right. And in many ways,
Right.
as you grow as a business and you get more notice, you're also, sometimes you feel like imposter syndrome. You feel like, oh, well, what do I know? And that legitimacy, or that kind of perspective, can sometimes limit the decisions we make, and sometimes get us to, like we were talking about earlier, about always being a yes person, always saying yes to things, even though it doesn't work for your schedule, for even your temperament, but you're saying yes. So a lot of times that saying yes to things is because you're trying to be everything for everybody, because you're, in a sense, intimidated to just be yourself. Like in a way, when we're overcompensating, it's because we're saying to ourselves, well, you just being you is not enough. So you have to be more than you. You have to be something for everyone, right? And I have absolutely found myself doing that in my lifetime. And I had this experience on the podcast where I basically was having some conversation with some father. He's the father of one of my youngest daughter's friend. And he's a therapist, a local therapist, who wants to write a book, who wants to be, an influencer and kind of have a following, but he hasn't done that. And we were having a conversation, and I found myself going like, oh, I should have you on the podcast. And I thought it was a good idea. Like, I thought having him as a guest was going to convey the story that I was trying to get at, which he comes from a very religious background. And I was really wanting to kind of encapsulate how religion is so important for community. And that's coming from someone who did not grow up religious. But I just have found as an adult that I just find that any religion creates a foundation a grounded foundation that also keeps us tethered to a community, and how important that is ancestrally, because the podcast, once again, is called Everyday Ancestral, right? So it's connecting to the podcast.
Right.
And so I had him on, and he did not do well. Like it was not good. Like he'd never done a podcast before. He was soft spoken and wasn't clear and didn't know how to bottom line things. It was just kind of all over the place. And I found that it ended, and I was working so hard as a host. I was really working hard to make him shine and to really like help him. And it ended, and I just felt like, oh, I felt like it wasn't good. And you could tell he didn't feel like it was good. And so then I even tried to say to him again, I said, well, hey, let's try to record on Sunday. So we had recorded on a Friday. So 2 days later, I was like, well, let's record it again. Maybe you just need another chance. We did that again, and it was even worse. And I just,
oh no.
But here's what I learned though. I was like, after that Sunday, I was like, why am I working so hard to make him look good? He's not ready for showtime. Like he's not ready to be on a podcast. He's not ready to have that light shine on him. And I was trying to treat it as though like my experience doing it, as though my years of working to be at a certain level was invalid. Like I wasn't valuing everything I had done to get to where I was. I was just treating it like, well, everyone could do what I do. And it was like,
right.
No, he couldn't do it. And I wasn't a good enough host to bring it out of him. So he wasn't there, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't get him to where I wanted to go. And so it was a real moment of like, you know what? I need to start honoring the experience I have and not trying, like, yes, I believe you should lift up your guests when they're on there, but bring in guests that already are at the level where they're ready to be on there. Like, I don't need to spend my time getting someone ready to be on the stage. Like, that's their work. And it was a real moment of like, honor your own experience and let people have the dignity of their process. But you don't have to take on their process, nor do you have to belittle your own.
That's an important revelation, I think, for sure, for all of us as entrepreneurs too, and just as human beings. I've watched it happen a lot, and I know I've been guilty of it too, even with team members of just like, well, why can't you do this? You know, and then I'm like, oh, right, I've been doing this for 10 years. They've been working for me for 6 months. That's not a respectful expectation.
Yes.
You know, kind of a thing. So
and it's not, you're not honoring your own process important. in that way. And I think that's even like, we have to remember as entrepreneurs, like even if you're, let's say 2 years in and you're still working at your craft, you're still figuring out how to make a profit, you still going down that path of entrepreneurship is still more than what most people do. You're still, once you go down the path of being an entrepreneur and you're, let's just say 2 years in, you are now past the percentage. I mean, you're now amongst a very small club of people that are willing to go down that path. And even though it's only 2 years, it's still more information than the person who never even went down that path has. And so I think I'm not trying to say we have to fake it till we make it. I'm not at all trying to say that. What I'm trying to say is that every bit of our journey is worth honoring. Every bit. It's not like we're just going to get to one place and then we've hit it. It's like, because that story that a lot of entrepreneurs tell themselves, like, well, I'll be legitimate when I get to this. It's like, guess what? Or things will get easier when I get here. It's like, it's BS, because what happens is, first of all, it never gets easier. It just gets more and more complicated.
Right.
And then two, if you don't start honoring your journey and your process now, then when will you?
Right.
Because you're never going to be enough. Well, you're never going to have it figured out. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's always going to be shifting. So if you don't honor the moment, then how do you get to, how to get beyond? How do you enter the next moment as a confident, strong, and just capable leader or CEO or entrepreneur.
Right. Right. Well, and I think you bring up a really important point too of respecting not only your place in the journey, but the other person's place in the journey, and not necessarily pushing them past where their comfort is. I mean, there are times in our journeys where we have to step out of our comfort zone and into the next thing. But we've encountered this as a marketing agency where we actually started putting it into our vetting process. Like, if we hit all your goals, do you have the infrastructure to handle the influx of clients? Because we didn't used to ask that. And what would happen was people would come to us with an expectation or, um, perception of what marketing was going to do for them. But there wasn't the infrastructure. They weren't at that place in their journey to be able to handle a significant or the significance of what we could ramp up their marketing. And so we actually had a couple of clients that we did more damage than good because they didn't have the infrastructure in place. And so they were getting more orders than they could fulfill. One client or another one, they were getting so many client calls that their wait list was like 3 months long. And so then they started getting negative reviews because there was backlog and products and wait lists, and it created operationally these horrific problems. And it was, we weren't respecting where they were in their journey as a company and as a business owner. And so now we're actually, people aren't used to those kinds of questions from a marketing agency. Hey, we just want you to market. Why are you asking these questions about our operations and this and that? And it's like, because we need to know where you are at in your journey, because we don't want to come in too early and actually sink your ship before you even get out of the harbor, kind of an analogy.
It's
And
so
so
true. It's
it's
so
really,
true what you're saying.
yeah,
Because you could actually close the business down if you bring them too much business too fast, and people forget that. They just,
right.
entrepreneurs want to just go go go, and it's like, no, what you
Yeah.
want is to not be a flash in the pan. What you want is some legacy. You want to have some staying power,
Mm-hmm.
and to do that you have to learn as you go. You have to organically um, grow at the pace that the business can handle successfully.
Right. Well, right. And to your point with including family and health in your business plan, to the point that your health can handle it and your family can handle it, because it,
Completely.
as you said, it eats up so much of your time. And I know one of my business partners, my co-founder Jennifer, and I were just talking about this actually this morning, of just the cost that we've paid over the years for pushing growth, too much growth too fast. And we were talking about hindsight being 2020 and going, if we had just kind of maybe taken it a little easier here, and here, there would have been a lot of heartache we probably could have avoided. But we were in that growth mindset. She and I are both risk takers. And so it's just, well, what's the next risk? What's the next risk? And there were some steep costs health wise that we've both paid for that. And our families have definitely taken the hit at different points. So I think it's a good reminder to respect, like you said, respect your journey and the people you're working with, and that growth is not always the best option.
Yeah, I have to say, like, more and more I'm talking to other entrepreneurs, and that is the most consistent message I'm hearing, which is how, when is enough enough? Like, how much do I really need? Like, I'm
Mm,
hearing business owners, talk about how it's like, well, if I become, a big enough business and we're actually profiting, like net profiting $1 million a year, isn't that good? Like, isn't that enough? Like, why do I
right.
have to continue to, why is growth the focus? Why isn't, like,
Hmm.
the sanity, the health, and making sure that, like, if you have a solid profit coming, like even I think some entrepreneurs need to think like this. Like, if you, let's say, start a business and it, you get it to, let's say, 5 million, but you're making 500,000 a month. So you're paying yourself a full salary that's like totally sustainable, life sustainable. But then you're also, the business is still profiting over 500,000 a year. Like, that's pretty darn good. Like,
Yeah.
that's seriously good. Like, even if you're getting anywhere between 500,000 and $1 million a year from profit, and everything is fully paid, that's just icing. It's like, that's pretty darn good. That's a good lifestyle right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, American culture, I always say, hustle culture needs to die very fast, very violent death. But I think it plays into this of, we glorify that hustle culture. We glorify that push, 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 sacrifice your health, sacrifice whatever to accomplish that piece. And I think it feeds into that nothing's ever good enough sort of a piece. And I think it combines with some of the personality types that are attracted to entrepreneurship too. It's not just a culture thing, but the culture definitely exacerbates that whole component. But it's something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't think about going into it, is like, when is enough enough? At what point am I going to say I've arrived? Because otherwise it's that horizon you're always chasing, and it'll always be something you're chasing, because we'll never reach the horizon. And, one of the books in Strategic Coach, Gap in the Gain, talks about this, of that horizon is something entrepreneurs always chase, and they never stop and look and go, man, look how far I've come. And instead they're always focusing on that, and they overlook so many of the benefits of the growth in their life, and, like you said, a really healthy lifestyle kind of a thing.
Yeah. And, one of the things that helped me think differently around Pluck, the business that I'm now running, is well, first of all, we're an online business, so that helps a lot, right? Because when you're an online business,
Right.
your store is open 24/7, first of all, but that doesn't mean you have to be available 24/7. So it was a real learning piece, because I looked around, for example, globally, and I was like, this is interesting. The work week is different depending on what country you're in. Completely different. And I was like, well, that's interesting, because that's a good reminder of, like, this whole work week schedule is made up.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily something that has to be one thing. Like, you have to do this or you fail. That's not true with business. That you actually, particularly when it's an online business, that you can create the hours that work for your lifestyle. But what your job is to clearly communicate those hours, because that's all the customer really needs to know. Is they just need to know, is someone available right now? And if they're not, when will I get my question answered? And so we just been very clear about, like, communicating, like, all answers get, all questions are answered within 24 hours, that we are never consistently online, but that we will get back to you within that 24 hours. And then we try to use AI. We try to use current tech to support the customer service online, because, keep in mind, when you're an online company and you have a product, you sort of, within that first year, start to know exactly what questions are going to be asked. Like, you start to see that it's always the same, 5 to 7 questions. And so then it's your job to go, okay, well, how can I answer those questions more upfront for people? So maybe I can answer those questions in our first emails when people come on. How can I answer those questions on my homepage? And then with a lot of this new tech, you can actually even just answer those questions right there. So when people go to ask them, the bot, comes up and says, oh, well, actually, this is the hours of, communication, or this, yes, we do ship internationally, and this is how, so you can answer all those kind of canned questions right off the bat. And then you're really just filtering down the really unique or rare questions to your customer service. And then I'm using virtual assistants for my customer service. So it's like, I am able to have them come on at hours that I wouldn't be, or my US team wouldn't be.
Right.
And so we're finding it to work really well. But then the key towards customer service is also make sure that your operations, as you mentioned earlier, are working smoothly, that you're not always in out of stocks, that you're not always having issues with your service and in your
Right.
operations, so that there isn't a lot of customer service. So we're constantly working to fix any bottlenecks, or to kind of like make sure that the communication is clear. Because ultimately, when you're online, and I believe this with any business, is that ultimately you are a customer service. Like I could say, oh yeah, we're an organ-based seasoning company, but it's like, no, our job is to put a smile on those people's faces. Like that's our real job. And so everything we do stems, tries to do that basically.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really powerful. Well, thank you, James, so much for joining us today and sharing some of your experiences. I think you've really shared some powerful tips and tricks for entrepreneurs and business people getting into business. So thank you so much for your time. And for anybody who's interested in checking out Pluck, where can they find you?
Well, you could find us on Amazon, just to search for Pluck Seasoning. Or you can find us at our website, eatpluck.com. And then you can find us on socials. We're also at eatpluck. And you can find me at Chef James Berry.
Wonderful. We'll put a lot of those links up in the comments and along with this podcast. But thank you again, James, so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
You have been listening to the Beacon Way podcast. Make sure to join us for new episodes every week. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Beacon Way on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.